Oh yes, this special memorial service session of Wake County Superior Court is now convened. The Honorable Michael R. Morgan, Judge presiding. Oh yes, God save the state and this honorable court. Please be seated and come to order. Welcome family members and friends. Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Pendleton. Thank you.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes. Once again, thank you, Mr. Bailiff, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored and humbled to once again be afforded the privilege to preside over this special session of Wake County Superior Court, which is dedicated to remembering those members of the 10th Judicial District Bar who have, in recent months, gone on to their final reward. I acknowledge the presence of elected officials as well as my judicial colleagues, and I thank my judicial colleagues as well as fellow members of the bar for their collective presence. Appreciation is also expressed for the astute and sensitive recognition of the local bar to establish a memorials committee, and for this committee in turn to develop such a meaningful program as this one today, which is planned and presented at designated times in order to pay deserving tribute to our fallen comrades in the law. I'm grateful for the faith and confidence of Senior Resident Superior Court Judge Donald Stevens to entrust this important court session to my care, and thankful to the 10th Judicial District Bar for welcoming my participation. Finally, and most of all, I thank, on behalf of all of us associated with the enforcement, practice, application, and administration of the law in our great county, the family members, loved ones, and friends who have allowed us to utilize this occasion to celebrate and commemorate the lives of those whom we remember today who have recently left us, as we fondly and admirably keep them in our minds and in our hearts. At this time, the court recognizes Attorney Mark Finkelstein, the President of the 10th Judicial District Bar, to facilitate the duration of the program.
Thank you, Your Honor. On behalf of the over 5,000 members of the 10th Judicial District Bar, welcome to this very special ceremonial session of Wake County Superior Court. This is, for me, the most moving thing we as a bar do each year. And I wish to, at this time, turn it over to a gentleman who has really done much to make it as moving as it is, and that is the Chairman of the Memorials Committee of the 10th Judicial District Bar, Andrew Shuford. Mr. Shuford.
May it please the court. Sorry for turning my back on you, Your Honor. Members of the bar, ladies and gentlemen, friends and family, thank you for allowing us to honor your loved ones here today. No matter the circumstances, losing a loved one is always difficult. But we are not here today to mourn. We are here today to celebrate the lives of 5 individuals, 5 lawyers, 5 members of our bar. And to paraphrase American composer Irving Berlin, the song is ended, but the melody lives on forever. And we're here today to join our fellow members of the bar in their chorus in celebration of your loved ones. And today we'll perhaps see a side of your loved ones that you may not have known, and we'll also undoubtedly see a side of each of our loved ones that we've cherished. And so our first speaker is a member of our committee, a very valued member, Burke Haywood. He's a Special Deputy Attorney General for the State Department of Justice, attended the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill as an undergrad, and also received his law degree from there as well. Burke?
Thank you, Andrew.
court. David Roland Minges was born April 2nd, 1956, and grew up in Rocky Mount. In Rocky Mount, he cultivated a wide circle of loyal friends who stuck by his side until the day he died. Lewis Pulley and David McGee come to mind, but there were many, many more. David went to Rocky Mount Academy, then on to East Carolina, where he majored in business. He got his law degree from Campbell, where, to no one's surprise, he excelled academically. David passed the bar and was immediately hired by Rufus Edmiston to become part of the staff at the Attorney General's office. He worked in the labor section a few years before joining our transportation section. One of his colleagues in the transportation section was the Honorable Michael Rivers North. David was one of several attorneys whose job it was to acquire property on which to construct highways. He was a condemnation attorney, and he was a very good one. Let me talk a few minutes about the characteristics that made David a great attorney and an even better friend. David was a zealous advocate for his client, the Department of Transportation. David gave each and every case he handled his best effort. Some cynics liken trying condemnation cases for the department to playing poker with the house's money. Well, David acted like the state's money was his money. He took his job very seriously, and he was a very able and faithful steward of the state fisc and the taxpayers' money. And here's a rather unbelievable story. Maybe 20 years ago, there appeared a protester walking down Wilmington Street by the highway building, exercising his freedom of speech with a sign or a sandwich board, I can't remember, with words to the effect, "David Minges unfair to landowner." While this story is actually true, the message on the poster board could not be further from the truth. David treated everyone the same and treated them fairly. David spoke his mind. He was always willing to share his opinion, and he didn't pull any punches. If he thought you were full of beans, he would tell you so. And he was not afraid of expressing his opinion to those higher up the chain of command, or even the Attorney General. To clarify, David grew up in Rocky Mount with Mike Easley, so he may have felt the hometown connection gave him certain liberties. It did not. His colleagues appreciated his candor. His supervisors, like Jim Richmond, not so much so. But there was no artifice with David Minges. Like Harry Truman, he was a plain speaker. He had a keen legal mind and was considered to be one of the scholars in our office. During his tenure at the Attorney General's office, he litigated many highway condemnation trials and authored some 75 or 80 appellate briefs, both criminal and civil. Noteworthy among David's appellate efforts was his representation of the department in Southern Furniture Company versus DOT. When the trial court denied David's motion to dismiss, he appealed. David hated to lose. The case holds that the denial of a motion to dismiss based upon the defense of sovereign immunity affects a substantial right and is immediately appealable. And this is a pretty big deal for us government attorneys. Another interesting case which David handled is Shell v. Moon. And this case is interesting because David not only represented the department, but he was a named defendant in the case. This case stands for the proposition that the Public Records Act may not be used to circumvent the rules of discovery. Again, this is a big deal for us attorneys who represent the state. In short, David left us an impressive legal legacy. David had style. In an office where khakis and blazers are the norm, David was almost always in a suit. He was a sharp dresser, and his style was not limited to his clothes. He was a fine musician. Guitar, drums, harmonica, with a special gift for the blues. A word about his guitar playing. As the result of a childhood hunting accident, David was missing parts of 3 fingers on his left hand, which is the hand you make notes and form chords with. Notwithstanding this handicap, David played beautifully. And what he lacked in dexterity, he more than made up for in style. With respect to his harmonica playing, think John Popper in Blues Traveler. David had that intangible known as soul. After 20 years at the Attorney General's office, David retired and opened his own boutique condemnation law firm, representing landowners against the state. And having been on the other side of David in several cases, I can tell you that he was still a zealous advocate for his clients, a smart and creative attorney, still fair, and always a gentleman. In 2012, after experiencing severe chest pains, David was diagnosed with lung cancer. Throughout the challenging ordeal which followed, he remained confident and was bolstered by his strong faith. As the pain became greater and the prognosis more ominous, David maintained a positive and cheerful attitude that was truly inspirational. He continued to live at his home in North Hills until he collapsed one day and had to call his friend Lewis to come get him up off the floor. He was transported by ambulance to hospice, where he died a few days later, on August 5th, 2013, surrounded by his family and his many loyal friends. He was 57 years old. David is survived by his siblings, Kari, Tommy, Margaretta, and Ellen. Now, David could be a little ornery on occasion, but there was no malice. I think it was David's frustration that things were not as good as he knew they could be. And David's plain speaking sometimes changed. But we who worked with him loved him and respected him, and we are so grateful for the many poignant memories he left us, and we still miss him every day. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Robert McMillan, who's a member of our committee, and he has spoken at these celebrations before. And in fact, when we learned he would be speaking again today, I got at least 3 emails saying, "Oh, I'd love to hear him speak." He has been described as the dean of the criminal bar, which may be true, but only goes a fraction of the way towards capturing the impact that I think he's had on legions of lawyers in this area. He graduated from Wake Forest University and the Law School of the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. Mr. McMillan.
Please quote. Ladies and gentlemen and friends of those who we're honoring today, it is my great honor to be allowed to speak in memory of my dear, dear, lifelong friend, Forrest Shuford Jr. I have prepared a brief summary so that I will be brief. I could go on and on and on. I have a card here with 13 points about my association with Forrest Shuford. I have known Forrest Shuford far longer than I know anybody in this courtroom. I know Forrest Shuford for as long, almost, as any person of my acquaintance. Forrest moved into my neighborhood in Cameron Park when he was about 7 or 8 years old. That means he was about 84 years ago. He and I went to Wiley School together. We finished together. We went to Broughton High School together. It took us 6 years to get through Broughton. It was slow. You can get through Broughton now in 4 years, because you're all smart. He and I entered the freshman class at Wake Forest College when it was in Wake County, in the same class. When Pearl Harbor occurred, I soon thereafter joined the Marines, and I went my way and Forrest went his way. And we stayed apart for a good many years then. But after I was licensed to practice law, I came back to Roland. And Forrest was in the Attorney General's office. And oh, it was a large, large, large office. There was Harry McMillan, the Attorney General, Harold McGallion, Wade Bruton, Ralph Moody, John Jordan, Forrest Shuford, and about 2 others. I don't know how many there are now, but there are more than that. He stayed there a while, and then he went to Washington and worked a while, but he came back. And I'd like to read this, and then I'll go into some more details. In thinking of Forrest Shuford, these names come to my mind: Jimmy Reeves, Willard Mitchell, Charles Blanchard, Lee Hood, Fred Allen, Vernon Cheatham, James Mitchell, William Eel, Robert Dillon, Billy Ragland, Billy Simpson, Hardy Mills, and scores of others. They were boys with whom we grew up in Cameron Park, and we were close, close friends. But once we got back in town, I didn't see much of Forrest from a legal standpoint. I never appeared before him in the Industrial Commission. I had handled a few cases in the Industrial Commission early on, but I never tried a case in the Industrial Commission while Forrest was there for many, many years. And he was there for many years. And I say that the Industrial Commission operated as smoothly as any state agency I've ever been acquainted with. I have never heard anything in the press about the Industrial Commission, which leads me to think it was operated in the fashion that we all treasure. And Forrest was largely responsible for this. He took great pleasure in this fact about the Industrial Commission. He told me one time he had conducted hearings in every one of the 100 counties of North Carolina, which is truly remarkable. And he took great pleasure in seeing friends and acquaintances in all of those counties, and he kept up with those with whom he had made contact. Here are some things outside of law practice that kept me in close touch with Forrest. Both of us enjoyed membership in the Roland Rotary Club. He provided valued assistance when my wife and I hosted innumerable old Cameron Park gatherings at our home on Hawthorne Road. Often when I was called upon to provide leadership to seniors and fathers, an organization for older lawyers, Forrest would be my strong right arm. We never seemed to run out of money when Forrest handled the checkbook, which was not the case when others were handling the checkbook. In his professional career with the Commission, his service was impeccable. In a career spanning many decades, there was never any question raised as to the integrity of the commission, and there was nothing but praise from all sides as to the quality of the service. On a personal point, I, along with scores of others, found Forrest to be a forward-looking person with a positive outlook and a happy nature. It was always a pleasure to share time with him. It was a delight to be in his company. He loved people, people loved him. He loved his work. I think that he told me, well, I have mentioned this, that he had conducted hearings in 100 counties. He reveled in telling immediate old friends of his youth as he traveled from place to place, conducting these hearings. Not to be overlooked is his devotion to his church, First Presbyterian Church of Roland, and the Early Birds, the men's group of that church, welcoming all denominations and all faiths. He was always a dedicated rooter for his alma mater, dear old Wake Forest, and he never missed a meeting for the Roller Rotary Club. He and his friend Hardy Mills, after both of them retired, covered all of Raleigh and nearly all of Wake County walking, day in and day out. I used to see him on the mall once in a while, sitting on a bench, he and Hardy having walked from no telling where. And every time I saw them, I accused them and told them that I was going to sign a citizen's arrest order, accusing them of violating the loitering law. The loitering laws say, or did say under the common law, those who wander around from place to place with no visible means of support. Forrest and Hardy always said, well, if you will charge us with that, we will plead guilty. But I never could get a magistrate who was willing to issue a warrant. I want to say some other things too about him on a personal notice. He was very liberal in his political leanings, as am I. He was probably not as liberal as I, but he was very liberal. But he commented, you know, it's interesting to me, Robert, why two of my very best friends in all the world are very conservative. And those two people were my best friends also, Willard Midget and Jimmy Reeves. And I wish today, and their political postures were as far from Forrest and from as far from me as could be imagined. But we were dear, dear friends. We were both, all four of us, were seeking the same ends. When I say they were conservative and we were liberal, they were seeking the same ends that Forrest and I were seeking, but by different routes. And we never argued, we just took different positions. And I only wish today that our public officials could take that posture. Conservative, liberal, both want the best for America. Well, why can't they get together and accomplish it? Well, with the attitude Forrest had with these conservative friends, that was certainly possible. Now, as you all might sense, I get emotional when I talk about Forrest, because I have known him so long and I have loved him for so long. In passing, I might say this too. When he moved into Cameron Park, it was like coming home. His mother had two sisters already in Cameron Park, the Newsom family. Mr. Joe Newsom had 4 children, Bill Newsom, Charles Newsom, Frank Newsom, and Betty Jo Newsom, and they were Forrest's first cousins. Coach Chick Doak of the NC State baseball team had 2 sons. Well, Mr. Joe Newsom was married to one of Mrs. Shuford's sisters. Coach Chick Doak was married to another one of Mrs. Shuford's sisters, and they had 2 sons, Chick and Peanut. So Forrest was warmly welcomed by his cousins when he got here, but he was even more warmly welcomed by me and our neighbor Billy Ragland, the two of them were scientifically inclined, and I was not. They told me Forrest and Billy stretched the string from Forrest's attic to Billy's attic that was waxed and tied to a tomato can. And each one had a tomato can that went into the string, and the other had a tomato can at this end of the string, and it was waxed. And Billy would sit in his attic, Forrest would sit in his attic across the street, right across from me, and they would talk to one another. And they swore to me they could hear one another. And I said they were premature Silicon Valley people. If they could hear along that string. And I never believed them because I texted time and time again, and it sounded like when you put a seashell in your ear. That's all I could hear from that tomato can. Anyway, he and I had so many fun occasions like that, and it lasted all our lives. Wherever we went, it was always fun to be with Forrest. And what it was true love. He was a lovable man, and he was a loving man. And he loved everybody. I never heard him say an unkind word about anybody or anything. A perfect gentleman, kind and lovable. And I loved him dearly, and I'm happy to say he loved me dearly. And his daughter is here today, and she echoes that. She wrote a note to the preacher at Forrest's funeral and said how much Forrest loved me. And I treasure that thought, that Forrest did love me. Now this is supposed to be sort of a formal gathering, I know, but I had to be personal because he was such a dear friend. And I want to close with this. And this is Forrest Shuford. This is Forrest Shuford. He loved his church, he loved his friends, he loved his state, he loved his work, he loved his country. Most of all, though, he loved his wife, Mac, and he loved his children. In connection with his wife Mac had once worked for my father in his law office, so I had that connection also. It can truly be said about Forrest Shuford that he paid heed to the admonition with which the prophet Micah charged God's people. Quote, I have told you what is required of you, to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Throughout his life, Forrest Shuford did do justly, he loved mercy, and he walked humbly with his God. To Forrest Shuford, my dear, dear friend, whom I love so dearly, well done, thou good and faithful servant.
Our next speaker is Ken Soo. He practices with Bennington Smith in the education section. He represents public school districts, and he is a graduate of law school at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. Mr. Soo.
May it please the court. Ann Majestic, my partner for many years. Ann was the better part of 6 feet tall, slender, stylish, blue eyes that could be very steely when called for. She had a commanding presence. She died last August, it will be a year ago this Sunday, of cancer. She was a partner and leader in the school law section at Barrington Smith for more than 30 years. Here are a few of the things that she did as a lawyer. She represented the school boards for Wake County, Durham County, Moore County, Alamance, Burlington, Weldon City. I could go on until I got to very close to 100 different cases. She served as general counsel for the North Carolina School Boards Association. She served as general counsel for the North Carolina Psychological Association. She chaired the National Council of School Attorneys. She pioneered the representation of school districts in disputes over the schooling of disabled children. She represented urban school districts in the Leandro case, in which the Supreme Court of North Carolina declared that students in this state have the right under the North Carolina Constitution to a sound basic education. Here are a few of the honors that she received. Distinguished Service Award of the North Carolina Bar Association, National Council of School Attorneys Lifetime Achievement Award, and earlier this year, the Education section of the Bar Association named its Distinguished Award for Anne. And here are a few of the qualities that defined her as a lawyer. A conviction that a strong public school system is one of North Carolina's most important institutions. The will to fight for what she believed. Insight, creativity, clarity, humor when called for, on the legal and practical implications for cases, and fairness. Anne often quoted our partner Wade Smith in her elegant office overlooking Fayetteville Street through 3 arched windows. She kept an old photocopy of Wade's views. It was taped with yellowing tape right above her right shoulder, her bookcase behind her chair. The list boiled down to the idea that you treat everybody with respect and humility, including the opposing party, the lawyer on the other side, and the witness you were cross-examining. But Anne most often quoted Wade as saying, practicing law is a hard way to earn a living, and so it could be for Anne. To get ready for this talk, I typed Anne L. Majestic into the Westlaw search engine. Her name appears as counsel or on amicus briefs in dozens of reported cases, many of them landmarks in North Carolina school law. I remember one of those cases as an example of the sacrifices Anne made to do her job well. CM versus the Board of Public Education of Henderson County. And Hank is in the audience, will remember saying goodbye to Anne on many trips to Henderson County. The case was brought by the parents of a child with autism. The question was whether the school system offered the child a free, appropriate public education as federal law requires. The parents wanted the school district to pay for an intensive, one-on-one behavior modification therapy in the home. The school district believed the child could succeed in a school-based program with other students. These cases in particular have an emotional toll. The plaintiffs may be struggling to meet the needs of children who are coping with significant disabilities. As Judge Thornburg wrote in one of the opinions in the CM case, one of the many opinions in the CM case, parents in these circumstances may understandably act with some sense of desperation. On the other hand were Anne's clients, teachers and therapists who have dedicated themselves to working with disabled children. School people often are upset and fearful about being drawn into a legal process where their motivations and the services they provide are under attack. The CM case began in 1997 with a hearing before an administrative law judge in Henderson County, which is a good ways west of here. Anne's own children, they're both in the audience, Michael and Catherine, were young then. She talked about how difficult it was for her to be away from them. But she spent weeks on the road preparing for the hearing. The hearing itself went on for weeks. A state review officer ultimately decided that the school district had offered the child an appropriate education. The case moved to the United States District Court for the Western District. Judge Thornburg dismissed the case in 2001, finding that the school district had done its job in the most recent year and that claims for previous years fell outside the limitations period. The case was appealed to the Fourth Circuit, which upheld most of Judge Thornburg's decision, but remanded for further proceedings after deciding that the limitations period had been told. In 2002, 5 years, much legal work, much time away from her family after the case began, Judge Thornburg entered the final dismissal of prejudice. It is a hard way to earn a living, but it was one that Anne was committed to. Anne believed in a strong system of public education, a system to break down divisions of class and race, a system that can build a fair society. Public schooling had shaped the character and careers of people she admired, including Terry Sanford, her mentor at Duke University, George Rochester, who founded the school law practice at Barrington Smith, and her partners Roger Smith and Wade Smith. Anne also believed in this profession of law. She supported her colleagues through leadership of the Bar Association's education section and of the state and national councils of school attorneys. Within our law firm, Ann paid special attention to the development of less experienced lawyers. She loved to talk about cases. Her eyes would light up under those circumstances. And she loved to ask hard questions. And if you started your answer with, "I assume," she was sure to remind you that a lawyer does not assume, that you need to know. She challenged us to give advice to benefit our school clients and not just state the law. She expected and set a high standard of written and oral advocacy. I tried in looking for those cases to find some quote that summed up the effectiveness of her advocacy, but words just didn't do it. Ann kept working through the later stages of her cancer, rail thin, but still a commanding presence. Ann's influence on school law and school lawyers will go on through her cases, through the national and state school law bars, and through her teaching and support of colleagues. She helped many to be better at this challenging profession. I'll end with a story that some of you, including Hank, Catherine, and Michael, have heard before. Years ago, Ann and I prosecuted a dismissal case against the superintendent of schools, and if you want to talk about something that's going to be a mess from the beginning, the dismissal of the superintendent is one of those things. Among other things, we were often depicted on the front of the local newspaper along with graphics that included pictures of a $sign going down a shower drain. The case included allegations of mismanagement of school funds. For all her strengths, Ann was happier with words than with numbers, so I got to examine the accountant. I thought I had prepared him well, but I was mistaken. I could not get him to hit the nail on the head. This went on for a while as I got more frustrated and he became more perplexed. I leaned over to Ann and whispered, "I don't think I can get him there." Ann leaned back and whispered, "You have to."
Our next speaker is Jim Richmond. He received his undergraduate degree from Duke, his law school degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I note that he clerked for Chief Justice J. Wallace Winborn the year I was born, and practiced in Asheville and Chapel Hill in private practice before going to work with the Highway Division of the Attorney General's office for what looks to be 22 years before he retired. Mr. Richmond.
Please report. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the first time I've been in a courtroom in 22 years. About as long as I was in the Attorney General's office. Pleasure to talk to you about my friend Charlie Hensey. Charlie and I had a lot in common. He grew up in a small town, Maxton, down in the Sand Hills. And I grew up in a small town in Piedmont, North Carolina. We both went to small high schools. We both went to Duke, and at a time when it's not the elitist institution that it is today. It's not all that hard to get in Duke, but it's a little hard to stay. We warned when we arrived that to look to our left and look to our right, that only a third of us would be there at the end. And that was true. After we graduated from Duke, Charlie went into service. I went into service after I finished Duke. I was a private in the Army, and Charlie was an officer in the Navy. And so after service, we both went to UNC in Chapel Hill to law school. There again, at a time when it wasn't all that hard to get in UNC like it is today, but and we managed to graduate. And afterwards, we both sort of started at the bottom. I was searching country titles for a law firm in the mountains, and Charlie was working for a collections firm down in the Sand Hills, and Charlie was given a pad of judgments, justice of the peace judgments, and to fill out, and
this whole pad was already signed by the Justice of the Peace. That bothered Charlie. He didn't think that was quite right. Presbyterian conscience bothered. So he asked the Justice of the Peace if she wouldn't wait until he'd already filled them out before she signed it. She said, no, she preferred it that way. She trusted Charlie completely. But Charlie and then had an incident that he was teased about probably the rest of his life. He filled out claim and delivery papers and took possession of a poor farmer's mule. That time, I think, was when Charlie started thinking he could not serve mankind and taking farmers' mules. He decided to join the Attorney General's office. Things weren't much better in the beginning in the Attorney General's office. He was sent to Polk County to try a condemnation case before Judge Chick Riddle, and Judge Riddle had a habit of, after the jury had been sworn in, he would get down from the bench and tend to matters back in chambers and let the trial go on. Anyway, Judge Riddle enjoyed swapping jokes with the sheriff back in chambers better than he did listening to a condemnation case. But in this particular case, Charlie, the landowner was Mr. Golding, and Mr. Golding was a lawyer there in Tryon. He's best known today for being the father of two prominent lawyers, John Golding down in Charlotte and Jim Golding in Asheville. But Mr. Golding was representing himself as the landowner, and not only that, he was his chief witness. And so after Mr. Golding took the witness stand and was sworn in, he went down to the council table and started asking questions. He'd ask a question, then he'd go up to his word and answer his question. And then he'd go back and ask another question. This bothered Charlie too. He objected, and so the bailiff went and got Judge Riddle and came back. Judge Riddle said, I understand that an objection is, Hensey, what's your objection? And Tran said, if Your Honor, please, he's asking leading questions. He Riddle said, now, Mr. Golding, you're an experienced attorney. The court grants some latitude on the leading questions on these preliminary matters, but from now on, try not to ask leading questions. Try not to put words in your witness's mouth. Well, that was early in Charlie's career. Things, as time went by, Charlie was assigned the dirty, thankless task that nobody else wanted, and Charlie did such a good job at that, of course, he got a lot of those. And he, time went on, he took on more and more responsibility. Charlie tried cases in the trial courts in North Carolina. He argued cases in the North Carolina Court of Appeals, North Carolina Supreme Court. Later he tried cases in the district courts, and he argued many cases in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. And Charlie had several cases in the United States Supreme Court, and an unknown certificate for admission to the Supreme Court. It's on motion of Charles McKinnon Hensey, and he was counsel. But Charlie was an attorney in the Highway Division when I arrived, and 22 years later, when I left, he was still working in the Attorney General's office, but he'd gone on to special litigation, and he had a lot of important cases in special litigation, and then toward the end of his career, he represented the Board of Elections, and I think that's when Charlie probably enjoyed practice more than anything. And when he was on the board, he was sort of the captain of his own ship, and he had many stories to tell about his experiences on the election. Charlie was a great friend of mine, and a great friend of a lot of other people's. He was a fine lawyer, a fine gentleman, and a fine friend. And I appreciate this opportunity to talk to you about it today. Especially, hope I've adequately addressed Charlie and what he meant to me and a lot of others. I'll conclude my remarks. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Charles Caldwell, who will be talking about C.K. Brown, who is a member of our committee and a friend of us all. Charles is Chief Public Defender for the 10th Judicial District. Went to St. Andrew's Presbyterian College as an undergrad, received his J.D. from Campbell University School of Law, and he has been twice president of the Wake County Academy of Criminal Trial Lawyers.
Good afternoon, sir. A lot of people here. Good afternoon, and thank you all for coming. I want to first thank the family of CK for inviting me to speak on CK's behalf. They are here today. Everybody, now I want you to close your directories. Don't look at this board. How many people here know what CK stands for? One, two, that family, y'all count. Rose, you don't count. All of us knew CK as CK. Had we not been attorneys and had known CK, we would have called him Ken Brown. And if even, and I'll bet you a dollar to a dime that even the people that called him Ken, if they said, Ken, what does that C stands for? He would change the subject. I never got that of him. I had to go to Jim Klein to find out what the C stood for. It stood for Cecil. He was named after his daddy. CK's bar number was 561. I didn't get a chance to call the state bar to see what the bar numbers go up to now, but I'm sure it's way more than that. CK is survived by and represented today by his beautiful daughters, Carolyn and Laura, and their family, and his brother Henry is here today as well. CK was predeceased by Myrna, the love of his life, and his third daughter, Kathy. And anytime CK would, in my days with CK, we had lunch every Friday. CK, Jim Klein, and myself at Cooper's every Friday for years and years and years. He would never bring up his wife. He would never bring up her. I think he just couldn't take it. But his daughter Kathy, if her name was ever brought up, CK would just pause for a few minutes and do nothing. He certainly loved his children. His family came to America from Germany, sailing on the ship Glasgow in 1872 and settled in Roland County, which is Salisbury. CK was born in Davidson, North Carolina. His father was a professor of economics at the college in Davidson. CK, being a good frugal German, took advantage of his father's position and got a free ride. He got free tuition at Davidson because his daddy was a professor there. Later on, he, while in the Army in 1955, he was stationed in Portsmouth, Virginia. It was there that he met Myrna, and being the good economical fellow he was, they jumped in the car, ran down to Dillon, South Carolina, and got married. So he eloped, saved some money there. After the Army, Cecil, C.K., went to law school at Carolina, came back and settled in Raleigh. Started in 1959 with Smith, Leach, Anderson, and Dorset. And then stayed with them for a few years, and then shared space independently with Demick, Dodd, and Reagan. And then finally in the mid-70s, C.K. moved to the BB&T building up here on Fayetteville permanently, and practiced law with the loyal and able assistance of his secretary, Rose Damon, who is with us today. C.K.'s, he was just a real good boy. Everybody liked him. He always did the best thing he could for his clients, and he did a good job. His claim to fame in the report books came in 1985. C.K. bucked the Court of Appeals and made new law in the North Carolina Supreme Court. The matter was Oates v. JAG Inc. And this recognized a subsequent home purchaser's cause of action in negligence rather than implied warranty against the builder of the home. And so I believe C.K.'s clients came out with about $20,000 after all that ordeal, and C.K. never forgave the Court of Appeals for making him work so long. C.K. was a man of habit and of rules. Had lots of habits. And one of his rules was never spend too much money on a vacation when you can get away with it. He was a Civil War and World War II self-styled historian. And to economize on his vacations, as I said, he had 3 daughters. Best vacation for C.K. was a trip to the Civil War battlegrounds, which was very economical, although not particularly entertaining for the girls in the family. One of his favorite lines was, "Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it." Well, C.K. learned something from his history, and that is if you do the same thing often enough and do repeat it, if it's a good thing, the good things are going to happen from it, and it makes your life a lot simpler. C.K. had some straightforward practices. One, don't work on weekends. These are all good things for us. Don't work on weekends. Leave the house at 8:20 every morning. Leave the office at 5:20 every afternoon. On Wednesdays, have lunch at First Presbyterian Church. On Thursdays, have lunch at Vic's in City Market. Friday at noon, go to Ray's Hair Shop. One Friday you get your hair cut. One Friday you get your hair shampooed. C.K.'s hair is about that big, but he figured if I keep that noon appointment on Friday, every Friday, it'll always be there. And you can stand across the street from Ray's, stand there with Jim Klein, he'd look at his watch and say, now at 12:25, C.K.'s going to walk out that door. Stand there and look, and he steps away. So here comes C.K., 12:25, 12:30 on Friday, go to Cooper's Barbecue, sit at the back table in the back corner, and that was C.K.'s routine. And another rule he had was that a Hershey bar, preferably with almonds, is the only appropriate lunch dessert. And in recognition of that and in expression of their friendship with C.K., Debbie and the folks at Cooper's Barbecue have donated a box of Hershey bars for all of us today. Thank you very much. Your Honor. Thank you very much. And these will be available for the taking. Thank you. Thank you.
Put those over here.
All right.
That concludes our speakers. I'd like to thank all the members of the committee who put this together. Brian Oaten, Vice Chair, Robbie Merritt, our videographer, who, if the families would like a copy of this, eventually there will be one available for you. Charlotte Sharp and Whitney Von Hahn, who basically run everything. Your Honor, Bailiff, Burke, for helping us today. All of you for coming, and each of the families for allowing us to honor your loved ones. Turn this back over to you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Chiaffi. Let the record show that I took this candy bar as a recognition to C.K. Brown and not as a gift. We've had a touching and meaningful program to have experienced and shared today. My learned colleague, Judge Brian Collins, had to go back and resume a case at 3 o'clock, but he and I talked earlier about the value of this program whenever it occurs. And it is so wonderful that it allows us who knew some of these individuals to learn more about them as we continue to treasure their legacy, and those whom we may not have had the pleasure and honor to know that well, to get to know them and to understand what their lives truly were all about as they continue to live on for so many of us. It also, as I'm looking across the crowd, brings so many folks who we may not see as often as we did as the time passes, to have a chance to renew acquaintance in the name of those whom we honor, including, as I look at this audience, my very first supervisor in the Attorney General's office, Mr. Eddie Spees, and my very last supervisor in the Attorney General's office, Jim Richmond. Indeed, these are the moments of our lives that we treasure. As we leave this place, let us be inspired by the legacies of those we have saluted today, as well as to be moved to aspire to establish such lofty legacies ourselves. Mr. Bailiff, if you will, we'll be in recess, sine die.
This Honorable Superior Court of the County of Wake now stands in recess, now stands adjourned, sine die. God save the state and this Honorable Court. Thank you everyone for coming.
Okay, brother. I really enjoy these.